Let us pray before we start. Heavenly Father, once again we have the privilege of asking you to be our special guest. I thank you, Lord, that we have this wonderful privilege. I thank you, Lord, that you are mighty and strong to save, and that you have all the power in heaven and earth at your command, and that you can protect us from any evil. I pray for your presence. I pray for the presence of your angels, your Spirit, and above all, Lord, enlighten our minds that we may see the deceptions of the last days. Not that they will save us if we know these deceptions, but that we may know where we stand in the stream of time, so that we can foster a better relationship with you and with our fellow men. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Stop the New World Order, get us out of the United Nations. That's a sign I once saw here in the United States, and I gather there are a couple of them around. That's quite interesting. I thought you might as well stop a freight train with a feather. I don't think we have much chance of that. It's all in place. Now there are basically 3 lectures coming up now. In the next 3 lectures we'll be dealing with this issue. I mean, if you've set up a system to dupe the world in 6,000 years, how am I going to do this to unravel it in 1 hour? It's impossible, or 2, or 3, or 4. This is a major, major job. So tonight we're going to look at history from the setting up of the Illuminaty up until the time of Pope John Paul II. Tomorrow night we're going to look at the time period since John Paul II to today. No, we're doing it tomorrow to tomorrow. Up until tomorrow. So if you want to know what's really happening behind the scenes, then the next 2 lectures will be crucial. In the 3rd lecture, we'll look at everything else. So it should get quite exciting in the next 3 days. And then, once we have unraveled this tremendous mess, then we will look at the solution. I cannot wait. I will heave a sigh of relief. I'm sick already of all this stuff. But one has to show the deception in order to be able to make the call, come out of her, my people, come out. So stop the New World Order, get us out. Revelation 13:3. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. Question: if it seemed to have a mortal wound, did it have one? No. It's a counterfeit. It's a counterfeit. Christ had a mortal wound. He really died and was resurrected. But this beast seemed to have a fatal wound. And the wound had been healed. So if you want to throw off suspicion, if you are a spy, for example, and you're spying in a foreign country, and they're really hot on your trail and they've identified you. Did the Reformation identify Rome as the Antichrist, yes or no? Yes, they did. They've identified you. They expect the worst from you. They know it's you and you're doing this, that, and the other. And everybody's watching you like a hawk. What's the best thing to do? Disappear. Go under. Pretend you're dead. And then everybody says, oops, where's our enemy now? He's dead. Everybody relaxes. And you set up your structure underneath, and then you go. And you eat everything up from the inside until there's nothing left. Isn't that clever? That is so clever. Now, when is an enemy more dangerous? When you can see him and know exactly where he is, and you keep your finger on him and on his pulse? Or if you don't know where he is and you don't even know that he still exists, when is he more dangerous? When you can't see him. You're absolutely right. I would like to propose tonight that Rome is more dangerous, or was more dangerous, when she was not seen than what she will ever be or could ever be when she is visible. One of the heads seemed to have a fatal wound. I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides. Now, the woman is a church. Beast is the political entity which she controls. The mighty end-time beast. I saw the woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy. Revelation 17:3. Well, we've dealt with those texts in considerable detail thus far. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color. So she had the color of sacrifice, the death and the resurrection. She had the color of royalty. She had purple. And she was decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. She had means. Having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornications. Revelation 17:4. We've dealt enough with her doctrines. They are full of these apostasies. And upon her forehead was the name Mystery. Mystery religion, Babylon the Great, mother of harlots, abomination of the earth. Revelation 17:5. And we dealt with that in a great deal in the lectures that we've held thus far. 2 Timothy 4:4 says they will turn away from listening to the truth and give their attention to legends. That's what the world does today. They follow blindly, and they substitute liturgy for cognitive, Word of God-based thinking. It's very sad. Where you go to church depends on your likes or dislikes of musical taste, for example. That doesn't make much sense. Now, let us start with the time of the Illuminati. And one of the greatest events of all time, an event which has a major impact on our time, is the French Revolution. And the French Revolution is in miniature what is planned for the whole world. So if we study the French Revolution, we can see exactly what is coming in our day. It's going to be equally or worse in its horrendous nature. The French Revolution was the movement into the New World System. It was the enacting of that great leap into the future. Revelation 11:3. The whole of chapter 11 deals with this issue of this rise of this beast out of the abyss. This beast means, of course, a political entity. This beast that rises out of the abyss, on which the woman will eventually, or on which the woman sits and controls the whole of the world. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days. That's the time of Roman Catholic supremacy, 538 AD to 1798. And they will be clothed in sackcloth. Now, who are these 2 witnesses? Well, we are told these are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. Now, who are the 2 olive trees? Zechariah 4:3-6 tells us, and the 2 olive trees beside it, one on the right of the bowl and the other on the left of it. What are these, my Lord? This is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, saying, not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord of hosts. So who are the 2 olive trees? This is the word of the Lord. Let's not change the biblical definitions. So, the 2 olive trees, the olive stands for the Holy Spirit. It's not by might. Our weapon is not a physical weapon. We fight with the sword of the Spirit, the Word of God. That's the only weapon we have. I carry no gun. I carry just a sound model here. And that doesn't even work all the time. Revelation 11:7, and when they shall have finished their testimony in sackcloth, because Rome banned the Bible, Rome didn't make it available to anyone. If anyone had it, it was a mortal sin. The testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. So, was there a power round about the time of the end of the 1,260 days that is a symbol of the great end-time confederacy that rose up and made war against the Bible? Yes, there was. It was France. And this power made war against the Bible and declared it null and void. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt. Wow. That's as bad as you can get. Sodom is the principle of debauchery, which is part of occultism, of course. Egypt, the great confrontation with God himself. Occultism standing against God, where also our Lord was crucified. So in a sense, the system crucifies the Lord and removes him out of the system. Also, it brings in the concept of Rome, because Rome crucified the Lord. Revelation 11:10, and that they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets, the Old and the New Testament, tormented them that dwelt on the earth. Did France do this? Absolutely. They did it. They made merry. They rejoiced. They sent gifts to one another, and they mocked the Bible. They mocked the Bible. In fact, they introduced the system of enforced atheism. Pike said, we will create the atheistic system, then we will enlarge it, and then at the end of time, we will use it to eradicate whatever we need to eradicate, and in the end, then we'll roll it up like a carpet, and we'll find victory over atheism and over any remnant of Christianity, and finally we'll have pure Luciferian worship on this earth. And in the New Age movement, we saw that two institutions, according to Benjamin Cream, were going to introduce this into the world, and those two institutions were the revitalized Christian churches, who were actually teaching Spiritism rather than the truth, and the other one was the Masonic Lodge. Those are the two that they used. The Masonic Lodge, of course, is the one that produces all the great preachers that we saw, that controls the revitalized Christianity, which is, in a sense, without cognitive function, just like paganism. Whatever the Spirit does, you do. If he says fall over, you fall over, whatever. 11:13, and after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of God, of life from God, entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. They banned the Bible, the French legislature, for 3.5 years, a day for a year. It was banned. And then they rescinded the ban, but it didn't go into effect until someone found it in a safe, and 3.5 years later, the Bible was unbanned again, made available, and that same hour there was a great earthquake. That's a symbol in the Bible of a great negative conflagration that takes place. Was there one in that country? Yes, it was the French Revolution. 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake was slain of men 7,000. We have the number 7 again. So this has to do with this battle between the divinity and the counterfeit divinity. The storming of the Bastille, one of the great events of our time, and what did they do? They enthroned the goddess of liberty. And this is history. There she was. They took a prostitute, They enthroned her, and they fell on their feet. They mocked, in other words. They fell on their knees, and they worshipped the goddess of liberty. And they took everything that stood for the kings and the mighty ones and the rulers, and they got rid of them. And there are the heads of the kings, Louis XVI and his wife. Here's the beheading of Louis XVI and the beheading of Marie Antoinette. And there is her head. They held it on a stick and showed it to the people. And there was great merriment and great rejoicing, and gifts were sent to each other precisely as it was told. Now, who was behind this French Revolution, and what is the French Revolution all about? It's taking away from those that ruled and governed and giving it to the people, but in actual fact the people were just being used, as Pike states, and as Masonry in its higher order states, as human herds, used to do the will of the higher fraternity. Now, the men behind it were Robespierre, and he was the head of the Jacobins, the Jacobin clubs. Now, what were the Jacobins? The Jacobins were like secret clubs. All the symbols of the Jacobins are identical to the symbols of Freemasonry. And you know the duck story, I'm not going to repeat it again, but that's what they were. All the symbols were exactly the same. The Jacobins formed the think tanks, the political parties today. Today you would have equal or similar Jacobin clubs that are set up in the form of the Council of Foreign Relations and the Bilderbergers. Those would be the equivalent of the Jacobins of those days. Then, another man that was very prominent at that time was Voltaire. To hold a pen is to be at war, Voltaire. And Voltaire, of course, was a Jesuit. And the head of the Illuminati, or the founder of the Illuminati, was Weishaupt. He was professor at the University Ingolstadt. He was a Jesuit. Now, if you look at the history books, they will tell you that these were ex-Jesuit because they turned against the church. Well, that's exactly what they want you to believe. That's exactly what they want you to believe, because this plan was worked out in great detail. The idea was to put an end, give a so-called mortal wound to the papacy, so that the suspicion would be removed, and put the power into the Jacobin societies, which would rule without anyone knowing that it was actually the same system having gone underground pretending to be dead. And so they had to pretend to give the beast a mortal wound, and the Jesuits were the ones that did it. You saw the Jesuit promise they will do anything, whatever it takes, in order to further the Mother Church. The Pope was taken into exile. I'm sure he was taken well care of. The fact that he died in exile is neither here nor there. He just happened to die in exile. But he lived a life of luxury. If the fact that many of the prominent men thereafter went into exile is also neither here nor there. Let's take a modern day example. You've all heard of Idi Amin, right? The greatest mass murderer in Africa for many a century. Where is he today? Living in luxury in Saudi Arabia, in exile. See? Big deal. All right. There is Voltaire. So he supposedly turned against the church. He's listed in your encyclopedia, look up anyone, as a Jesuit. And they will say, he must be an ex-one because he went against Roman Catholicism. What about Jean-Jacques Rousseau? The social contract, man is born free and everywhere he's in chains. One man thinks himself the master of others, but remains more of a slave than they are. So Voltaire and all of these people, they came together, the Illuminati, and they planned the new constitution for the world. And this new constitution would put the so-called power in the hands of the people. Now, in the USSR, was the power in the hands of the people, or were the so-called people with the power in their hands ruled with an iron thumb, iron fist? What was the case? They only appeared to have the power with the people, but the people were being used as gun fodder, as human hordes. Now, what they decided was to set up a new Bill of Rights for the humankind, and they called it the original Human Rights Declaration of the French Revolution. Human rights. Now, human rights sound great. Today, if we listen to the politicians of the world, what do we hear? The law of God, or do we hear human rights? We hear human rights. Human rights have been enthroned as the law of nations. Now, human rights sound great, and if you read them, they make a lot of sense. But if you read them carefully, there's the sting of death in them. Did you know that? Because in actual fact, they are not God's way of giving you liberty, but they entrench certain counterfeit measures which are against the law of God. Now, the arrogance of it, that the French Revolution brought them out in the form, this form that you see here. That was the original declaration, and it came out on 2 tablets of stone. Is that not interesting? Aha. Now, the question we have to ask ourselves is, whose human rights are these? Are they something that we should be very proud of, or do they come from another source? Well, again, the symbolism will help us. At the top, you saw there was the triangle with the all-seeing eye. Who does that represent? Represents Osiris. The declaration, and then you have the serpent with a tail in his mouth. Now, who is that? That's a symbol of Lucifer, the life-giving serpent, and a very prominent symbol in occultism. And you have the freedom from the chains over here, and you have all this interesting symbolism. And then you have this funny little hat there. Did you see that? Now, this funny little hat was the hat of the Jacobins. So the Jacobins, the leaders, and then finally the revolutionaries of France, they all wore the little Jacobin hat. It's cute, eh? Now the question is, what does the Jacobin hat represent, and who does it represent? And when you donned it, under whose authority did you stand? Well, let's have a look a little further. You'll make it large for you. You can see it all very nicely. There it is, the little Jacobin hat, the serpent with a tail in the mouth. There they are. And above all, the all-seeing eye of Osiris, Lucifer. Lucifer is in charge of the Human Rights Declaration. And what is the Jacobin hat? Well, let me take you to the British Museum, where we have the god Mitra. And he is killing the bull, and helping him is the dog and the snake and the scorpion with its sting back there. And let's go to the side of Mitra and examine what's on his head. Oops! Do you see that? The Jacobin hat is the symbol of Mitra. That is Mitraism. And the god of Roman Catholicism, because the very system of Roman Catholicism is Mitraism. So the whole of the French Revolution and the Declaration of Human Rights was under the auspices of Mitraism. Now, the first Charter of the Rights of Nations came by Cyrus the Great, and when my soldiers in great numbers peacefully entered Babylon, I did not allow anyone to terrorize the people. I kept in view the needs of the people, the sanctuaries. I put an end to their misfortune and their slavery. Do you know an organization today that tries to bring about the image that this is exactly what they do? The United Nations. When they go into an area, they allow the turmoil to continue until the problem has been resolved. Then they go in and then they act this role. So this mortal wound that the papacy received in 1798, Pope Pius, when he was dethroned by Napoleon, his ring was torn off, By 1804, Pope Pius VII witnessed Napoleon crown himself emperor. Napoleon took the Vatican States. Mazzini attacks Rome, and Pope Pius is exiled. He's restored in 1850, but he had lost the Papal States. And what did Napoleon do? The first thing Napoleon does is he returns and he declares religious freedom, and he sets everyone free that had previously been suppressed by Roman Catholicism. And this is a picture of Napoleon reinstating the Jewish religion, and the Jews bowing down at his feet, thanking him for his kindness and generosity. And so the heat is off, the beast is dead, and now everything is in the hands of the people. But behind it all is the serpent, controlling the issues. So we have more violence than the world has had experienced to that time. Joseph Bonaparte, 1768, King of Spain, and this comes from a Masonic book. And what does it tell us about him? It tells us that he was a high Freemason, and that he was actually the Großmeister, the worshipful master of the Oriental lodges. Now his brother, of course, Napoleon Bonaparte, same thing. So Napoleon enters and does whatever it is necessary to unite Europe and to rid Europe of that which is problematic. So giving the power to the people. Finally, he loses the battle at Waterloo, and he is stopped. So we have the role of Britain in terms of ensuring freedom growing. Now let's have a look at that War of Waterloo, and we look at the role players. Well, Wellington was the one who fought on the one side, Napoleon on the other, and on the one side you had Michel Ney, here he is, on the French side, and you had von Grouchy on the French side, and both of them were high Freemasons, as well as Napoleon, and his brother, as you saw, was even the Grand Master of the Oriental Lodges. On the other side, you had this German fellow, Blücher, and then you had von Schnarrenhorst, and they were high Freemasons. Now, isn't that interesting? So you have all of the major role players in this war being top Freemasons. Now, they are a sworn brotherhood, sworn under oath to stick together and hold together and build each other. So they set up this war, they bring about the conflagration, and then they achieve what they want to do, the new state, and then the so-called perpetrators are no more. The ones who did it all, who caused the damage, the Napoleons, who did all these terrible things in the end, they're taken away into exile, removed from the dangerous situation. Everything has been achieved just as they wanted it. So you have good cop, bad cop. You remove the good cop, you place the bad cop, you put the good cop in place. You make that one bad, then you replace him with another good cop. Well, then comes the First World War to again take issues a little bit further. Kaiser Wilhelm. Now, this is an interesting picture. What does this tell you about Kaiser Wilhelm? Oh yes, this comes from a Masonic book. They're very proud of it, that every single king was a high Mason. And every emperor there was a high Mason. So there you have one, that after this French Revolution period, there were only Masons in control. In the whole of Britain, there were only Masons in control. In the whole of Europe, that's where they ruled. Here's Kaiser Friedrich III. What is he wearing? Masonic regalia. They are all Freemasons. So on both sides of the fence, you have Freemasonry. 1854, Pius proclaims the Immaculate Conception of Mary, and he summons the First Vatican Council in 1870, and the dogma of infallibility and ultramontanism triumphs. The Pope is raised up to the level where all power is seated in him, but apparently he is toothless and has no power. Now, why is it that the very ones who run Masonry, who are the Jesuits, are the one who see to it that the papacy rises to this ultramontanist power? And now they have to plan their final strategy. Who were the enemies of Rome? There were two major role players who would not buckle under. The Protestants, where were they situated? They were situated in Germany, and they were situated in the Protestant countries around that area, Czechoslovakia, and all those areas. And then there were the Orthodox, who would not buckle under the papacy. That split and that rift was very ancient. And all the world needs to be under Rome. So it was necessary to create a thrust into the East to take control of all Orthodox countries. Now, those first wars that Napoleon fought was to soften up the hold of those nations and to break them down to the point where the final takeover could take place. The next war was to take that situation even further until the stage was set when Masonry could go in and with the power of the people topple all those regimes and enforce their rule. And that happened in 1917 when the Bolshevik Revolution took place. They had everything in control. The next problem was to rid the world of Protestantism, those that believed the Bible. That is the war of Catholicism. I want to tell you that every single war that was fought on this planet, well, let's not say every single one, but 99% of them were religious. So the Ultramontanists triumphed by 1870. By the end of 1870, the Pope apparently had only a tiny little piece of the Vatican left over. He was a prisoner, but he was hailed the greatest man, but his people were in control of every government. Unbelievable how brilliantly they worked. They infiltrated everything. By 1917, the Russian Revolution took place. Fatima's message from Mary: Russia will be converted, the Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me. The other vision was a vision of hell, and the third had recently been revealed, referring to the assassination attempt of Pope John Paul II. So now you have the system going in, suppressing the Orthodox Church. Rome says, Mary promised that they would be consecrated to me. You're setting up a good cop. Sooner or later, this good cop will come and say, Orthodox Church, if you listen to me, I will set you free. How nice. By 1928, the papal nuncio in Germany, Pazzali, left the powerful center party to the right. Adolf Hitler comes to power. Now, who was Adolf Hitler? Well, Adolf Hitler was trained by the Jesuits. And if you look at the book Mein Kampf, on the back, it even has the priest, the Roman Catholic Jesuit priest, who wrote the Mein Kampf for him, or dictated most of it. And by 1929, the papacy is declared sovereign ruler of the world. They had everything in place. Now, Pike said there would be 3 major world wars. The first, the second, and then the final religious battle to rid this planet, finally, of every last Protestant. Here they signed the Concordance, 1929, and the smallest state in all the world is once again formed. The year is 1929. Now, in order to qualify as a political entity, in order to qualify as a beast, rather, you have to be a political entity. So in 1929, the Vatican State is again formed as a political entity, so we must again have a beast who lives. Is that right? So by 1929, everything was set up. The Roman Catholic Pact was signed, Vatican got its state back, and the wound was healed. By 1934, Yugoslavia, the Ustashi are founded, and they assassinate King Alexander of Yugoslavia. Now, who were the Ustashi? The Ustashi were a Nazi organization. They were actually subject and befriended by the Nazis. By 1941, Croatia declares its independence, and the Cardinal Secretary of the State, Eugenio Pacelli, signs the Concordat with Germany in 1943. And there he was, Pacelli, who was later to become Pope. Very interesting. Now here's the whole Pacelli lineage. You have Marcantonio Pacelli, and this is a Masonic signal. I'll give you a couple. When they put the eyes to the top like that, when they stand with their feet at 90 degrees with their hands behind their back like that, that's a Masonic signal. When they signal like this and raise the eyes to the top, that's a Masonic signal. So that's a Masonic look. And then you had his Filippo Pacelli and Eugenio Pacelli, and they founded the Banco di Romano, that's where the money lies, with Rothschild money. And this man, Pope Pius, who was he? Well, after his election, his conclave had the symbolic number 13, by the way. There he is after his election, and he had this stamp printed, which is the Masonic one, which has the 13 leaves, which has the Masonic ribbon in it, and he had this stamp printed as well, or this portrait made, with its Masonic signal over there, just as Anthony Sayer, first Grand Master of the London Lodge, founded 1717, had. So now, occultism controlled the world in the religious sphere and in the political sphere. Secretary of State Pacelli, who was later to become the Pope, of course, visits George Washington during a private visit to the USA, the George Washington home, and he visits President Roosevelt. Now, who was Roosevelt? Roosevelt was, of course, a very high Freemason. References to all of this, there they are again, just in case somebody says this is thumbnology, you can really study it for yourself. Here's President F.D. Roosevelt with his lodge picture. He was a Freemason of the highest degrees, and therefore, according to our definition last night, a Luciferian. Here you see him with the Masonic handshake, Roosevelt and Myron Taylor, who he made special delegate to the Vatican after Pacelli's visit. So you have two great Freemasons over here working together with the Vatican. Now notice that handshake with the thumb on the back of the hand or on the knuckles. Normally like that, that is a typical Freemason handshake. We'll have to learn some signals to see how history actually ran. J. Edgar Hoover over here, President Dwight D. Eisenhower honors illustrious J. Edgar Hoover 33 Grand Cross at the special White House ceremony. So these people, also being 33-degree Freemasons, worship, according to what we studied last night, Lucifer. Now let me give you some Freemason hand signals. Well, these are the great politicians of the times. This comes out of a book exposing Freemasonry. It's all in the literature list. The finger of Freemasonry. If they point with the finger, now everybody can point like this, but when it is a photograph taken and published in a newspaper with the name of the specific news media attached to it, and then they have a statement underneath of whatever the event is, that's a Masonic signal. This one over here is a Masonic signal, sometimes with two fingers, sometimes over the eyes, the Masonic vision. These hand signals actually all come out of sun worship. You have these movements over here, which are also taken from Buddhism and sun worship. And the holding on to the tie. Here's a classic Masonic picture. Here you have Kissinger showing the finger, and in the back you have, in the mirror, you have the holding of the tie. And then it says this and the other is going to happen. These are Masonic signal pictures. The handshakes of Masonry, that's one of the handshakes. There you can see the Masonic finger in one of their own documents. 1776, by the way, the 1st of May, was the founding of the Illuminati. So May Day that we keep today has to do with that. Freemason signs on the Phi Beta Kappa organization, so the finger, the dates are very important. The finger to the mouth, the symbol of Horus, the secret mysteries of Horus, we dealt with that last night. Freemason initiation with the 3 candles and the ceremonies. Here are lodge pictures of Freemasons. Let's have a look at how they stand. Very organized, very, very organized indeed. The whole ceremony that we have of opening of parliaments is based on Freemasonry. And here you can see some more interesting Freemason signals. This one, for example, is a Freemason one. That one over there is a Freemason one. So now what if a team, a football team, stands like this on the field? The owner of that football team is a Mason. And the whole system of sport is run by Freemasonry. They control sport, for example. Here's another interesting Freemason handshake. Notice it is just like this. You take the hand like this. And we'll see that the Pope uses this one very much as a signal picture. We need to know these signal pictures and Mason stance and Mason looks. Remember also that the United States has the symbol of Mitra and the goddess of liberty in this particular statue, and all these symbols of the United States and every other country in the world is based on occultism. In your own dollar, I know many of you know this already, the word one stands for the one. That's why you're one of the few countries in the world that still has a $1 as unit, the lowest unit. One is the symbol of Lucifer. Now, how many symbols of Lucifer are on this dollar note? Hundreds. We can't deal with them all. For example, you have the web of the spider everywhere over your dollar note, the web of the spider. In the New Age movement, in Masonry, the web of the spider is a symbol of Lucifer, who will eventually enweb the whole earth. Then you have your 2 seals of the United States on either side. And if we look at those, and you look at them a little bit more carefully, you have Annuit Cuptus Novus Ordo Seclorum, and you put the Masonic hexagram on top of it, then you have A, S, N, O, M, and those are the letters which can spell the word Mason. And you can also have alto on the other side. So if you look at these symbols, they are really quite fascinating. On the back of your dollar, you have the one symbol, and tiny, 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 like a little micro dot in the circle of the dollar, you will have the symbol of Moloch, which is the owl, the symbol of Moloch. Now there's the one, I've enlarged it for you, and there's the half circle, the symbol of the moon goddess, and there a tiny, tiny little dot, which is the symbol of Moloch, the owl. So let me enlarge it for you even more. There it is, and there you can have your little symbol sitting over there in the corner, the little symbol of Moloch, the owl. I've tried to enlarge it even more, but it gets a bit fuzzy when it gets to there. Now that coinage was always used in occult societies and in the society of the worship of the sun god. Let's have a look at the tetradrachman of the head of Athena, for example. There she is. On the reverse side, they would have the owl, the wisdom. Now, in your fairy tales, you always also have the owl as a symbol of the wisdom of Lucifer. It's the symbol of Lucifer. If you look at the Great Seal, you have Annuit Cuptus Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means a new order of the ages. Over there you have the numerals which spell out 1776, which was, according to what you have, the day of your great festivities of the founding of the nation, but in actual fact it's the founding of the Illuminati. And you also have May Day, and then you have the ribbon of Moloch, which you can see enlarged for you over there. I have enlarged it. There you have the all-seeing eye of Osiris, and then you have 13 levels, which are the 13 levels of Masonry. Now remember, in Masonry, Each brick is isolated from the other by mortar, so each brick is isolated. It doesn't know all the details of the other brick, but together it makes the structure. So you have various institutions which form part of masonry, and we have to ask them themselves what they are. There you have the ribbon of Moloch as well. Let's just make sure that we've got this right. Here in the Roman Catholic Cathedral, there you have the phoenix. There you have the symbol of Saturn, or the god Moloch, the god of death. And of course you have the ribbon in this as well. Let's enlarge this a little bit. There you have it. The ribbon, the symbol of Moloch, which is on your dollar. And you have all these symbols over here as well. Okay. If you look at this side, you have the hexagram with the 13 pentagrams inside of it, and you'll have 13 stripes, and you'll have 13 feathers, and you'll have 13 arrows. And if you take the first letters of that, you get Arto, and then you have Arlington, and all those states as well. So that is your great seal, and it is the symbol of Moloch, the symbol of Lucifer, with every single detail masonically enshrined upon it. That's what it will look like on your dollar note, and that's what it means. Of course, the symbol of the great eagle is also a symbol of Osiris. Now, according to Ayn Rand, who was the girlfriend of Philippe Rothschild, these are the levels of masonry. So this comes from masonry itself. It's got nothing to do with me, so don't be angry with me if you find names on here that you don't like on there. I didn't make it up. All right. At the bottom, you have humanism. In other words, the doctrine that all are responsible for themselves. We are not responsible to a higher order. We saw that last night at an infinitum in the Masonic Lodge. Masons, no aprons. The lower aprons, the lower no apron Masons, those that work for Masonry without knowing that they are part of Masonry. They don't even know it. These people are used like gun fodder. They are told lies. They are deliberately misled. We saw that last night as well. And then you have all your Masonic sub-organizations like the YMCA, Young Men's Christian Association, and the female counterpart of that, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Guides, Pathfinders, all of those. These are so infiltrated into society we don't even recognize them anymore for what they are. Now, I'm not saying that if we have used these names that we are wicked or whatever, because some of it can be perfectly innocuous, doing good things and taking kids out to learn how to survive in the field and learning good basic principles and all of these. But these organizations are used as feeder groups. They are unaware, but they are controlled by higher Masons, and they use them as feeder groups. And when they see, and there's all kinds of them, there's Rotary and the speaking clubs and all these sub-organizations, and they draw from them and they invite those that seem able into higher and higher categories. You've got to get in contact with them before you can draw them. So the Rotary, the Lions, the Odd Fellows, all of those form the next level of Masonry. Then you have the Blue Masons and John's Masons, that's the Blue Lodge. And then you have the York Rite. The York Rite is the so-called Christian Rite, which is anything but Christian in its higher levels. It's highly occult. And higher than that, you have the Scottish Rite. And the Scottish Rite takes you right up into straight Luciferian worship. In the other rites, you can branch off also to all kinds of sub-organizations, and mingled in with all of this, you have Rosicrucians and all of them. Now look at what forms part of Masonry. Communism. In order to be a leader in the communist community, one of the top leaders, you have to be a relatively high Mason. That means you must be steeped in Catholicism. You must be of the select few chosen by the Jesuit order. And this is enforced atheism. So that through creating the enemy, you can provide the solution. Then comes B'nai B'rit, which is Jewish Masonry. So you'll have all your banking fraternity and all those people in there, all of it controlled by the occult council, which is Rome. Then you have your council of 500, sometimes called the council of 300, which is the Bilderbergers. That's where your kings and your princes and your high industrialists and all those top people, who also, of course, belong to other organizations such as Opus Dei, and all of them belong. Then you have your council of 33, which is really the top dogs in the world. Some of those will be in the Club of Rome, some of those will come from the Bilderbergers and all of those. They also control the major oil companies and the riches of the world. Finally, the Council of 13, and then the secret name that has never been revealed, but I have no problem with it, it's the Pope. Roman Catholicism. Let's prove that. The church is of necessity intolerant. Heresy she endures when and where she must. That's what I said earlier on. But she hates it and directs all her energies to destroy it. How much of her energies? All of it. So everybody who is not in agreement with the occult principles of the secret religion, the mystery religion of Rome, has to be eliminated. Everyone. If Catholics ever gain a sufficient numerical majority in this country, religious freedom is at an end, speaking about the United States. No man has a right to choose his religion. New York Freeman Official Journal of the Bishop of Hughes, January 1852. The church does not and cannot accept in any degree favor liberty in the Protestant sense of liberty. And the Catholic Church is the medium and the channel through which the will of God is expressed. And the superior authority is only through the church. That is Catholic principles. Protestantism has not, never can have any right where Catholicity has triumphed. So the aim of Masonry, the aim of all these political structures, is to control the world and to rid the world of all opposition. As I've said, I have it in my possession, Masonic statements that the ultimate enemy that must be destroyed off the face of the earth is the one who believes the Bible, literally. I saw another beast coming up out of the earth and had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon, and it exercised all the authority of the first beast before it, and caused the earth and those dwelling in it to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. We dealt with that when we did two beasts become friends. So the United States, as a Masonic power, rises. Now there are millions and millions of people in the United States who are totally unaware that they are being controlled by the Masonic power. And the one is an image of the other, as we can see even down to the details of the architecture, this one having been designed by James Hoban. Now, let's have a look at the so-called dichotomy, this so-called Cold War between the USSR and the United States of America. And between the two of them, all the world was rubbed into a fine powder. There was chaos in every country in the world. Believe you me, in the smallest, tiniest little, infinitesimalest little country, there these two powers were rubbing up what was left. In my own country, you had the so-called war between the groups. Karl Marx joined the League of the Just in 1842. That is one of the Jacobin clubs. Later it was called the League of Communists. He started writing the Communist Manifesto in 1844, and it was published in 1848. Interesting date, 1844. Now, being a Jacobin and being part of this manifesto, he must have been a high insider Jesuit Mason. He was Jew turned Catholic. Interesting. Here you have your president, ex-president, Roosevelt, then you have Stalin, and then you have Churchill. Those are the role players on the one hand, and all three of them high Masons. All three of them. This man over here, I saw his apron in the Lodge Museum in London. This one we know was of the high degree Masons, and of course Stalin as well. What about Hitler and the Jesuits? Hitler said, "I learned much from the order of the Jesuits. Until now there has never been anything more grandiose on earth than the hierarchical system of the Catholic Church. I transferred much of this organization into my own party." Secret History of the Jesuits. The whole of the structure of Nazism was based on the Jesuit concept. The SS, by the way, SS are the symbols of Lucifer. If you have the rock band Kiss, they use exactly the same symbols. Was constituted according to the Jesuit principle. Himmler was head of the SS, was closely associated with the Jesuits through his father. Hitler said of him, "I see Himmler as our Ignatius of Loyola." And Joseph Goebbels was also a trained Jesuit. So on the one hand, you had the United States, you had Britain, and you had Stalin, and all of them were high Masons. On the other hand, you have Adolf Hitler. Now, who's the real enemy in all of this? Who's the real enemy? Protestantism and the Orthodox Church. So by 1917 they had the power through the First World War to take over Russia in the Bolshevik Revolution. And the Masons were in control. Now it was time to rub out the Orthodox resistance and to rub out the Protestant resistance. Get rid of it all over the world. Goebbels, Himmler, both of them Jesuit-aligned Freemasons. And the beast rises. You have to have a bad guy versus a good guy. But the bad guy is just playing the role of the bad cop. The good cop and the bad cop are actually on the same side. They've always been friends. They're brothers. The symbols will tell us something. The symbol, of course, that they used was the swastika. There it is in the circle. There's also the great Maltese cross. All the symbols of Freemasonry, all the symbols of the occult world were there. By the way, it's interesting that Napoleon sent his legionnaires to Egypt to unravel the mystic power of the Egyptians, particularly in regard to the battle between God and Egypt and the occult power that Thutmose wielded. And Adolf Hitler did exactly the same. Why did he send his strongest legions under Goebbels to go into North Africa and to secure the whole of the Egyptian mysteries? Napoleon had 13 huge volumes written, and this man as well. And they studied mind control. He used mass hypnosis to dupe the people into believing whatever it was. Here he respectfully greets Hindenburg, who has the same Masonic regalia and who was also a high Mason. So they catapult this man to power, and he works with the young and he enthuses them, takes power, and one of the principal Catholic personalities to help Hitler was Franz von Papen, leader of the Catholic Party in Germany and friend of Pacelli. So Rome works with Nazism. The pictures that we see are all Masonic. The looks are Masonic. And the symbols, the Reichsadler, are Masonic. The structure of the hand is a Masonic signal too. The open hand is the symbol of sun worship, symbol of Lucifer. And these pictures that you see over here, he posed for them. So these are not taken at a speech. He got a photographer to take them and he posed for them. Masonic signal pictures, the finger of Masonry. And the so-called wedding between Russia and Adolf Hitler. There is a double Masonic figure over there, again over there. Here he is with the nuncios and with the papal ensigns, and there you have the cardinals giving the same signal. So they were all one and working together. The Roman Catholic Church catapulted him to power. They needed him to do the job. The Pope and the Führer, here he is with Pius, These two worked together for the destruction of Protestantism in the world. Yugoslavia had to go. The Orthodox Church, Romania, had to be trampled underfoot. When Adolf Hitler attacked the East, did he march towards Moscow? No, it was not his plan. He took everything else all the way around. Interesting. What is the first country that was taken in the Second World War? Just like that, and it was all over. Not a shot fired. Poland. Poland was taken. Not a shot fired. Now why was that? You see, Poland is a Catholic country. Everything was Catholic. Nobody was to be damaged in Poland. Take it, not a shot, secure it, safe. What's the next one that was taken? Just like that. France. France taken, secured, safe. The two Catholic enclaves, safe. Now we need the liberation of these Catholic enclaves. And then the military went in. And what did they do to the other nations? What did they do to Yugoslavia and Romania and all those enclaves all the way around there? What did they do to them? They flattened them. They flattened them, and then they went north. And Croatia, separated early on, declared independent, safe. Roman Catholic. All the Catholic nations were secured, and the others were flattened. Flattened. Now, this man will have much to account for one day. What did he do with the church? Well, firstly, he had to secure the vote. And he said, if anybody turns against him, there's big trouble. Here he is given an interesting handshake here by the Reichsbischof Ludwig Müller, who greets Adolf Hitler. There's the Roman Catholic man, and there's the Lutheran bishop. Now, why this bishop with this interesting ensign on his pockets? Well, the real bishop was put to death by Adolf Hitler, and this one was put in his place as head of Protestantism. This is a plant. That is a Jesuit man shaking the hands of Adolf Hitler over there. And then this mighty military machine and the mightiest symbols ever devised march into the world. Now, what are these symbols? There you find them in Theosophy. There it is. It's the symbol of Lucifer. Alice A. Bailey. There we go. Lucifer is the one. We also found it here in the lodge. There it is in Buddhism under the toes of the Buddha. So the swastika, symbol of Lucifer in all ancient cultures, all the way back to wherever you want to go in history. The swastika, the open hand, the symbol of Lucifer. And he uses the children, and he gets the masses on his side, and now they start this grinding war. This grinding war. Two enemies, the real enemies are where? You tell me, where are the real enemies? The real enemy supposedly was Britain fighting against Germany. No real invasion of Britain. Nothing. No real invasion. No, he's fighting and flattening whom? Yugoslavia and all those countries. Until all the resources are washed out. Finally, the Allies come in and they start throwing firebombs. Now, where do they throw them? By the way, that's against the Geneva Convention. That was against all laws of righteousness. They throw firebombs on the north of Germany, and they incinerate the north of Germany. Now, who lived in the north of Germany? Protestants. The south of Germany is Catholic. And what lived in East Germany? East Germany was the Protestant enclave. That was the one seat that was the powerhouse of Protestantism. So they have this mighty battle, this mighty war. Hitler declares that Russia had been defeated in 1942. Pope Pius consecrates the whole world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Cardinal Cayera wrote, "The apparition of Fatima opens a new era. It is the foreshadowing of what the Immaculate Heart of Mary is preparing for the whole world." Big hype. The enemy has been defined. It is atheism, it is Russia, it is orthodoxism, it must be eliminated. And the Pope sets him up as the man in white, the hero. Hitler's regime collapses. Colonel Beck of the Polish says, "The Vatican is the main cause of the tragedy of my country." By 1946, the Yugoslavian army takes back Croatia. But who runs the Yugoslavian army now? Russia. Archbishop Stepanek is supposedly arrested, imprisoned, supposedly for 16 years. Our Lady of Fatima is crowned with all these millions and millions of dollars of money and pearls and precious stones, and the promise will be fulfilled. Russia will be consecrated. Easy to say that if you know you already own Russia. 1947, the Cold War begins. The atomic race begins, 1948, 1950. Our Lady in Rome again receives pilgrim statements sent to Moscow. By 1950, they're calling for nuclear war with Russia. Now you have these two parties fighting. All of them were Masonic. Everybody in Britain, everybody on the United States side was Masonic, everybody in Germany was Masonic, and Adolf Hitler cannot be found. Oh, here's a tooth. It belonged to Adolf. The rest of him is burnt up. There is no trace of the man. What happened to the high Nazis? Where did they go? They went to South America, and many of them ruled later as whatever, Secretary Generals of the United Nations and all kinds of things. Those that could not be readily identified, they stayed. The others got cushy little things. And then when they were 99 and a half years old and on their last leg, diagnosed with cancer, they put them into a safe house and gave them television and all the luxuries of life and held a trial outside and said, "See, we found him guilty." Isn't that pathetic? They all got away with it. The United Nations is nothing other than the final rising of this confederate beast that will control the world, and no one else but this beast, this dragon of Apollo, or whatever you want to call her. The day will dawn when the vision of the United Nations will save the world. When the reality of the United Nations starts bearing fruit, then the breath of immortality will be a living reality on earth. Robert Miller, former UN Secretary General, he has been called the philosopher and prophet of hope of the United Nations. He is deeply spiritual. From his vantage point of the level of global statesperson, he's seen a strong connection between spirituality and the political cultural scene. So church and state must come together. After the war, what happened to East Germany? Who was it given to? It was given to Russia. By whom? By the President of the United States. Map drawn. There, Russia, you take it. What was introduced thereafter? By the way, when Russia was permitted to invade Germany, they only came as far as East Germany. And then the wall was put up, the so-called wall, that stopped any further incursion, but the East was totally given over to Russia. They sent in the most barbaric hordes of people that you can imagine. They even broke off the faucets and the toilets and took them with them because they thought if they opened the taps at home, the water would come out. But what did they do to the morale of the nation? They raped them, they pillaged them, they hung the women up by their Achilles heels, they ripped open their stomachs, they took their babies out, they smashed them against the rocks. Who promised to do that? The Jesuits promised to do that. The biggest destruction of human morale happened in East Germany, while the West built a wall between the Catholic conclave and that conclave, and they enforced atheism by law. And they waited, they have time, 80 years, until Protestantism was gone. Then it becomes time to say, Enter the good cop. Let's take it back. What did they do to the Orthodox Church? They took everything away. To make it look even, they took everything else away. But Roman Catholicism today owns everything, and 10,000 times more than it ever owned before. I've been to those countries. If you go to the Catholic ones, like Poland and parts of Hungary, they're booming. You go to the Protestant ones, they're annihilated. There's nothing left in them of infrastructure or human psyche. They are destroyed. Roman Catholicism murdered millions of people secretly, using monsters like Stalin. Now this man over here speaks to a giant audience. This is the Under Secretary General of the United Nations, Joseph Reed. And he gives a speech where he says that all religion is subject to the United Nations. Every single religious body in the world, only through the United Nations. I want you to watch his Masonic signals as he gives this speech. He says, well, he uses this one, the form of the globe. He uses this one. He uses both fingers like this. And everyone is carefully measured. He uses this one. And he used the sign of Lucifer, this one, 7 times in his speech. 7 times in his speech. These people, as I've shown you in last night's lecture already, are Luciferians. Now let me show you this little video of this man, and you watch him carefully. And then we watch the flash, because the media, only their media, takes the picture when he makes a Masonic sign. And he goes, snap. And then we've frozen those later to show you when they make the signs. Watch how it works. And we'll listen to his speech. It's very interesting. So let's have some sound. I think I must switch this off or mute it. Here we go.
I make this appeal because the United Nations is also your organization, our world organization, your United Nations. Delegates, please remember, the United Nations is the only machinery we have for collective cooperation among all nations. It is the only worldwide institution for furthering development. The United Nations is the only universal mechanism for protecting human rights. The United Nations is the only shared framework for strengthening international law. Delegates, the United Nations is not one of the luxuries of international life. The work of the United Nations is of vital importance for the betterment of life on our planet. I make our world organization your United Delegates, please remember.
So you saw the signals that they give. Remember what they were? This one, this one. He gave this one 7 times. These people have an agenda. Every single church must be subject to them. If you're subject to them, you're subject to Rome, because they're subject to Rome. It is the way to oneness. That's an acronym for Lucifer. Leads to supreme oneness, another acronym for Lucifer. It is like a river flowing towards the source, the ultimate source. And these are the structures on earth whereby the world is controlled. These are the Jacobin clubs of today. The Council of Foreign Relations, the United Nations, the Bilderberg Group, the Club of Rome, which, by the way, has divided the world up into 10 regions and has called the rulers of those 10 regions kings. Interesting. The Royal Institute of International Affairs and the Trilateral Commission. and together they make the hexagram with a round table in the middle. The occult, secret, controlling power in the middle. The 10 regions, according to global occupation, are these, how they will be divided up and how the boundaries will shift. And you'll have 1 and you have 2 and all of these. Some of them have changed slightly, they've modified them slightly. So these are the main regions. And the economies of each one is going to become dependent on the economy of the other. And we will have to see a redistribution of wealth as was practiced in communist countries. In other words, they took away and redistributed according as they saw fit. The same will happen in every single country on the world, in this world. That's why they're going to move hordes and hordes of poorer people around richer areas, and then, like in the French Revolution, you're going to have a repeat of what happened before. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings. Now they even call them 10 kings, who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. So this is the final new world order that was set up as a consequence. If you thought Russia was not in, you now see that it was in. In fact, the entire military power of Russia was funded by money from the West, including your country. It's a puppet system set up for the purpose. If you look at communist China, they're all Masons, every single one, and we'll be dealing with this as we go along. The kings, along with the beast, they have one purpose. They will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them, so their final effort will be to destroy finally all those who pay allegiance to the Lamb. The organization is the United Nations, Foreign Relations, Bilderberger, Gorbachev Foundation, and they found the World Constitution and Parliament Association, which has pulled together the draft constitution for the world government, all in place already. Officially, it is known as a Constitution for the Federation of Earth. This comes from Gary Carr, En route to global occupation. Gorbachev Foundation, where does it have its seat? In New York. 1995 conference sponsored by the foundation. The State of the World Forum towards a new civilization was held at the Fairmont Hotel and the Masonic Auditorium in San Francisco. A conference document speaks of a new world civilization, and they write, "We are experiencing the birth of the first global civilization, an historic, timely, global initiative." The whole world will come together. All the murders by Stalin, the whole game with all the so-called tyrants, Tito and you name them, Ceausescu, whatever they were all Masonic rulers. And all of them are so-called bad cops. They're removed, but nobody knows where they are. They say Ceausescu is dead. They have a little video of somebody going bang, bang, and that's it. And the others, nobody can ever find them. What about Kabila and all of those in Africa? Dead. Who announces it? Someone else. Where is the body? They don't know. It's gone. Somebody took it, stole it, whatever. It's very interesting how they work. When they set up their rulers, how did they make them heroes? You first make them terrorists and then you make them rulers. Very interesting. For example, in Europe, there was France totally controlled by Germany, and then they set up a terrorist organization, and the head of the terrorist organization is Charles de Gaulle. And they make him the Scarlet Pimpernel. Here a bit, there a bit, blow up this, blow up that, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And at the end, he's the hero, he's the next president, he's one of them. If you take it in the Middle East, it's exactly the same thing. You set up a terrorist organization, the head of it, you make him Yasser Arafat, and Yasser Arafat does his thing, blow up this, da-da-da, da-da-da. In the end, you make another nation, you make him the ruler. Same in Africa. You set up a terrorist organization, you make the head terrorist the hero, Nelson Mandela, and then at the end of it, you reinstate him in power, and they're all Masons. They're playing a game. The ones who put him in jail, they are Masons. The ones who released him, they are Masons. And the ones who rule finally, they are Masons. Why do they do this? In San Francisco Weekly, Jim Garrison Jr., the head of the Gorbachev Foundation USA, said, "The planet needs a council of elders, drawn from the highest echelon of politics, science, and the arts and commerce." Garrison predicts that over the next 20 to 30 years, we are going to end up with world government. It is inevitable. Let's have a look at some of these organizations. The CIA. There we have the symbol of the sun worship. All the symbols of Masonry are in there. If we take NATO, we have the symbols of Freemasonry. If we take MI5 of Britain, there's the all-seeing eye of Osiris, and you have the triangles over there, the UK intelligence. If you take the CFR, you have the rider on the white horse with the Masonic finger, they're Masonic. If you take FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management, there you have the circle with the triangle in its mouth, plus of course the ribbon. If you take the Navy, you have the shining one sitting on, of course, the anchor, symbol of Freemasonry as well, but the shining one is who? It's the phoenix, symbol of Lucifer. Every single one of these organizations has Luciferian symbols. They're Masonic. If you take the board of government, the Federal Reserve System, you also have the phoenix rising out of the ashes. The FBI uses the Masonic symbols. The state of Colorado uses the Masonic symbols. UNIFEM uses the Masonic symbols. That's, of course, as we saw, Masonic symbols. Let's have a look at the Trilateral Commission. There's its symbol. Unravel it, and you have 666. If you take the Federal Reserve, by the way, you have 6 stars over there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 6 over there, and you have 6 stripes. That's 666. Titan's number is 666. The Titanic, no one can touch us, not God, not man. Lucifer, Luciferian. So these symbols all refer to 666. Here's the seal of the Selective Service. They have SSS. S is the 6th letter of the Greek alphabet, so that is 666. Here is the FFF. F is the 6th letter of our alphabet. That also stands for 666. The Central Florida uses the logo 666. If you take the Aquarian Conspiracy, there is its logo. Marilyn Ferguson, that's a symbol of Osiris. You'll find it on the New King James Version Bible, and you'll find the occult symbols on most of the Bibles, because these people have control and have translated and changed many of the texts. John Foster Dulles, Catholic Secretary of State under President Eisenhower, he worked with Cardinal Spellman and Pope Pius. President Kennedy himself, there you had the beginnings of this confrontation with Vietnam and the so-called Cold War confrontation. And then you have Cuba down there. I'll show you that Fidel Castro is a wonderful Mason and a wonderful friend of the Pope. All a pretense to create the system that you need in the end. Why did Buddhist monks burn themselves to death under the power of Diem, who controlled Vietnam? Through the strategy of John Foster Dulles and Pope Pius, the Diem dynasty was put in power in South Vietnam. Today the Diem dynasty is gone. Buddhism is totally under the Vatican. If Buddhism wanted its power back, it had to be subjected totally to the Vatican. The Dalai Lama has himself subjected himself to the power of the Vatican. And if you look at this regime, the brothers, the one was the Archbishop of Huin, the other was the head of the secret police, all of them Roman Catholic. Then, in 1956, there was the so-called putsch. Every now and then they have to create a sort of situation where East meets West. Prince Prainard Mincensky is released. And finally today, some people are actually aware and saying, hang on a second, why should this Pope, who did so much damage and worked with Nazism, why should he be declared a Pope, a saint today? Then Pope John the 23rd comes, and the Vatican Council and the ecumenical movement. So by 1962, everything had been accomplished. Protestantism was dying and was disappearing and was ready for takeover. By 1962, the doors opened for the full ecumenical movement, all the religions coming together. This was such a brilliant move. And today, you have in place, through the Vatican II signing of the Council documents, every single plan that was set to bring about this union. Even some of the Catholics walked out, like these two, Lefebvre and some of them. And this Pope stood in front of the crowd. This is their official document of at the death of Paul VI. And it said, "Come unto me, and I will give you rest." So you create the chaos, you create the mayhem, and then you create the hero. And he will be the one who gives you rest. It's a diabolical plan. It's a sick plan. And he has this particular staff fashioned where Jesus makes the Masonic triangle with his arms. He's totally emaciated. He looks like a skeleton. And it has the bent cross, which is the symbol of Lucifer, the broken cross of Satanism. And that is the staff of this Pope, who unites the world's religions, all of them, including Hinduism, including Buddhism, all of them subject to Rome, including the Orthodox Church, all of them. And then it's time to enter the fray as the one who will save the world from all this conflagration. Greeting with the Soviet President Podgorny, Vatican, 30th, 1967. And Pope John Paul II does the same. Now look at this. Albert G. Mackey, 33-degree Freemason, General Grand High Priest of the Royal Arch Freemasonry from 1859 to 1865, in the USA, states in his work, The Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, that the High Priest of the Royal Arch officially wears the ephod. We have to now find out who the highest Mason in the world is. Well, here is a picture of Pope Paul VI, and there you have the breastplate of the High Priest over the ephod. Isn't that interesting? He wears it. So if Mackey says that the High Priest of the Royal Arch officially wears it, well then that's him. There he is again, wearing it. This is from Osservatore Romano. This is the official Vatican newspaper. There he is, wearing it, hanging around his neck. He is the High Priest. And now everyone visits him. This is UN Secretary General at that time, U Tunt, receiving a nice Masonic handshake. Waldheim, who, there was lots of drama about him being into Nazism and all that sort of stuff, also receiving Masonic handshake. And here are some interesting signal pictures for you. Nixon, Chao Lai, Mao Zedong, all of them Masons. This is classic Masonic signaling. And when they show the almost shaking of the hands, it's a signal to the world that they are almost where they want to be. Almost where they want to be. Here you have Mao Zedong showing his finger as Masonic. Here he is together with Kissinger in the Masonic signal. They murdered millions. They murdered millions. And they're all working together. Here you have Nixon with the Pope. And there you have a nice Masonic handshake with Kissinger. Another one with the president of Mexico. And here is Genscher with a Masonic signal. Here is Strauss and Kissinger with a Masonic signal. All the leaders of Europe are Masonic. Classic Masonic picture. Kissinger pointing with a finger, while the Russian Gromyko is there with the hands on the knees, signaling, I am totally at ease with the decisions of Masonry. We're totally have it under control. Your very high Freemason over here, 33-degree Freemason, which makes him, according to the definition, a worshipper of Lucifer. You all know this man, Ford, previous president, and Brezhnev, the Russian, both of them Masons. And you thought they were enemies, didn't you? You thought they were enemies. They were friends all along, planning the takeover of the entire world for Rome. Here I have the full catastrophe, all of them together. These are, look at these interesting signal pictures. Look at them looking at each other while they're pointing with their little fingers, the Masonic signals. And you have the Russians and the Germans and all of them together. Interesting one over here, pointing the symbol of Osiris, pointing to the mouth. What I am about to say, the secret, is for the initiated. You will know what I am saying, but for the human herds it is not understandable. Here you have all the big people. This one, of course, became Kohl. Well, he was always Kohl, but he became the Chancellor, Helmut Kohl. Again, there you have Tito and Brezhnev together with the Masonic signals. These, some of them, were lifted up as monsters, playing the bad cop, making it impossible for the people to eke out a living. The church was suppressed. We need the good cop to say, now, Tito, stop doing what you are doing or we will rattle your cage. And then everybody, like in the case of Napoleon, falls down and says, oh, thank you for the pressure. What can we do? Obey me and everything will be fine. Certainly, Pope, we'll do it. That's what they did. There you have Ford again and Tito together, and you have the Chinese delegates, Hao Ping. These people, all of them, these are all Masonic pictures of Ford and all the people in control then. Even Newsweek, if you watch the newspapers, you watch the news, you will see their Masonic signals. And they show who is who and what is what. Look at this one over here. Fascinating stuff, how they work together. Supposed enemies, but birds of a feather flocking together behind the scenes. This one over here comes from your own Masonic lodge here in Tulsa. Gerald Ford signed 33-degree Freemason. So I'm not pulling this out of my hat over here. And what about your next president over there? If you're interested about him, about Carter, there he is with B'nai B'rith. If you think Nazism is dead here in the United States, of course, with the freedom, look at the Masonic finger. Nothing is dead. Look at this Die Zeit with this magnificent Masonic signal picture of Chancellor Schmidt at that time with Jimmy Carter, both of them giving the Masonic signal and telling the world how far down the line and on track they are for their one world Unitarian government. And if you thought that the Arabs were not included, I have news for you. Here he is with the Kaiser Haile Selassie, as by the way where the Rastafarians get their God King from, just by the way. And here you have the president of Jordania, King Hussein, with all the Masonic regalia, and the Pope. Every single nation in the world is ruled by Masons. And in order to do it, you have to have the people on your side, so you create the masses, and you keep them just on the breadline. And then you create the workers' organizations. Now, who controls the workers' organizations? Well, of course, the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church controls all trade unions. Here is the Pope identifying himself as the friend of the workers, donning the hard hat, going out, creating the manifestos. They put 22,000 posters into Roman Catholic churches portraying Jesus as the friend of the working class, redistribution of wealth, and the organizations that control all industry, control the inner workings of the higher elite is Opus Dei. That's sort of a secret society within a secret society, and your FBI, by the appointment of the previous president of this country, appointed an Opus Dei man to run your FBI. So you're controlled by Rome 100%. Here you have another secret society within the papacy, having this symbol, which is about the symbol of Baphomet, symbol of Lucifer. These are the warlords of the Pope, the knights of the Pope, and notice the symbols that they have, all Masonic. The mafia, all these organizations are controlled. They use the same symbols as knighting. All of them are one and the same. The whole British power is the same. For the occult world, you have the Congress of Wandering Bishops. This is a terrible society. Look at the Masonic signals over there, the occult signals, the all-seeing eye. They control the New Age movement and all of those through the Masonic lodges. And finally, the Orthodox Church capitulates. And there they are. And the Protestant Church has capitulated. All of them have signed the documents recognizing Rome in the ecumenical spirit. Then comes the second reign of terror, liberation theology. Father Camilo Torres, who was shot in 1966, declares, "The Catholic who is not a revolutionary is living in mortal sin." It's astonishing. If you look at Catholic countries, you have two classes of men. The poor, like Mexico, the poor masses and the rich elite. The poor and the rich. And by this means you control people. Rome cannot stand the middle class. All through the ages she controlled with an elite, and they had serfs. And we're going back towards that same situation. And they do it brilliantly via the economics. And then when Pope Paul died, this is what the obituary said in 1978. Pope Paul will be mourned by Catholics and Protestants, by Baptists and the Orthodox Christians, and by Muslims and Jews and people of every faith and land. So by 1978 they had it sewn up. Through their violence they'd achieved what they wanted to achieve. Because he was the first to visit them, the first pope to let the world know that he saw himself, in his own words, as the father of the whole human family. That was the official obituary given out by the Vatican. That is their official document, a tribute to the Pope. That is arrogance. God, in his wisdom, has seen to it that true Protestantism is distributed throughout the world. Did you know that? We'll be dealing with that still. God, in his wisdom, has seen to it that true Protestantism at the end of time is distributed throughout the world. So that you cannot just take one country and flatten it. They did that with all their First World Wars and their Second World Wars. They took the major Protestant enclaves and they flattened them, the opposition. The final war is far more difficult to fight. The final battle to eradicate the last vestige of Protestantism will have to be fought in every single country in the world. And that is a problem for Rome. The way to achieve it is to become even more brilliant in strategy. You have to raise up bad cops, like Tito's and Hitler's and Ceausescu's. You have to raise them up in the religious sphere. So you create them, and you nurture them, and you arm them, and you fund them, and you create them all over the world, and you create a cataclysm such as the world has never seen. But this time, in the final analysis, within every nation of the entire world. And finally, remember the statement by Peck? The citizens of the world forced to defend themselves will be ready to eradicate the fanatics that have been raised up. And then finally you focus the all-powerful raised hatred of all the peoples of the world against the one group that you wish to target. And through the media and this mass hypnosis of the media, you target them and you raise the ire of the people. Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, Jews will worship him, Muslims will worship him, no matter what it is. Here's a Jewish synagogue, and there's a little window up there. I asked them, this, by the way, was in Czechoslovakia. So I went there in Czechoslovakia and I said to them in this Jewish enclave, what's that little window up there? And they said to me, oh, that is the window facing the east. And I said, well, what's its significance? They say, well, when the sun strikes that window and the beams of light come into the sanctuary, into the synagogue, that's when the worship begins. So I was quiet for a while, and then I asked the guide, well, if that is so, then everybody is facing the east during this worship session, right? And he said, well, yes. And I said, now why? Why are you facing the east? And he was quiet for a while. He was obviously in trouble. And then he said to me, well, we face Jerusalem. And I said, so in Czechoslovakia, Jerusalem lies in the east? And he was deadly silent for a while and ummed and ahed and didn't answer. Judaism today is not Judaism, it's Kabbalism. There are only a small proportion of real Orthodox Bible-believing Jews, and they are so indoctrinated they even are in that situation where many of them believe that only they and nobody else will see the kingdom of heaven. The rest is Kabbalism, subject to Rome. I will show you this in the next lectures. If you think the great leaders of the banking elite that the world out there tries to sell off as the New World Order people, they are tiny little pawns subject to Rome. Rome is the one that the Bible says we must watch. Rome is the one that will receive worship. These are occultists. They will bow the foot and the knee to Sunday worship. You watch them. The Rothschild cousins, Eli, Guy, Elaine, are they the ones who control the world? 3 men? Well, it's easy. 3 men would be gone, right? No. There must be something much mightier than them behind them. The Roman Catholic system, the greatest hierarchy that ever lived. All these great buildings, all these great enclaves receiving their triangles and their mystic signs, they are really nothing other than occultists. Let us show you something that might interest you. Here is the Star of David. Can you see it? Very interesting. Now, what is written in the middle over there? Well, it says in the middle that there is no God save Allah. Ya Allah. Isn't that interesting? So the symbol of Islam, the secret symbol of Islam, sometime after completing parts, well, never mind that. The secret symbol of Islam is also the hexagram, which is the so-called Star of David. Well, let's go to India and look at this interesting one over here. Here is Lord Ganesh, who is just a symbol of Osiris, of course, being worshipped over here. And on the reverse, what do we have? The hexagram. And what does it say in the middle there? It says Om. So the hexagram is the symbol of Hinduism. The hexagram is the symbol of Islam. The hexagram is the symbol of Judaism. The hexagram is the symbol of Catholicism. The hexagram is the symbol of occultism. The hexagram, the hexagram, the hexagram. Do you think that they are opposed to each other? They're not opposed to each other. It's a joke. Well, let me show you the Idlib Museum in Syria. I really was there. It's not just put there graphically. And let me show you the hexagram in the Hittite culture. There it is. And you know what? The people there, they knew it. The guide of the museum was a highly knowledgeable man. I had a long conversation with him, and he told me the origin of the hexagram from his perspective. And he said it's actually a symbol of our one God. We all have the same symbol. And they said they're not against the Jews. They have no problem with the Jews. He says they have a problem with Zionism. So what do? You create the problem. And you ferment the problem, but you don't find the solution, because all the world must be duped into believing that peace in the end is better than confrontation, even if it takes giving up your religious principles. Satan wants even the smallest worshipper under his feet. There are the symbols of the pagan religions of the Aleppo Museum. They're exactly the same as they come through the ages. There's the symbol of Islam, and it comes from forever. There it is, the ancient symbol of the cross, which is the symbol which will be on most of the notes in Europe now. And if you're wondering why we have so many of these yantras, let me show you what they mean. Here is the bull lying on his side, and rolled up over here you have the yantra. Let me enlarge that for you. That's what it looks like. You'll have it on all the New Age symbols and the occult ones and the drug world. It's the symbol of the phallus. Want to see it again? There it is. It's the phallus of the bull, and the bull is the symbol of Lucifer. Through the phallic system, he controls the world. So there you have the yantras and the solar wheels. These are the symbols of the workers' organizations of the world. These are the symbols of sun worship. These are the ones we will find in the New World Order. By 1978, Pope John Paul I is elected, but he rules only 33 days. And there's good speculation that he was perhaps poisoned. Perhaps he didn't fit the bill as precisely as he should. He was very interested in cleaning the act within the church, but they want a political agenda. So this man is removed, and this one comes in its place. Now I'm going to end with this section, because we're going to deal in the next lecture with this man. My Pope, that's what Mary says, Paul II, I confirm for you is the Pope of my secret, the Pope about whom I spoke to the children during the apparitions, the Pope of my love and the Pope of my sorrows, thunder of justice. This is the Pope that will set up the final movements according to the visionaries of Mary and Father Gobi and all of those visionaries that we dealt with in the lecture, Signs and Wonders. And what is this vision? Let's consult the pontifical professor Malachi Martin, Keys of this Blood. Clearly the new agenda, heaven's agenda, the grand Masonic language, design of God for the new world order had begun. Everything was in place. And Pope John Paul would stride now in the arena of the millennium endgame as something more than a geopolitical giant of his age. He was and remains the serene and confident servant of the grand design, the top man, all power seated in him. Whether he controls it personally is neither here nor there, but that is the symbol that is held up to the world. Whether the Black Pope does it behind the scene is neither here nor there, but he is the symbol. He is the man of sin who will enforce the laws which will bring about the final confrontation. And then this last enemy will be heralded as the enemy, the fascist, the Christo-fascist sect that is against all peace and righteousness on this earth. Finally, the man in white has got the world united, and peace can reign, and one group stands in his way. We're going to see something interesting, such as the world has never seen. Now, we're going to start tomorrow with this Pope. Not tomorrow, it's the day after, and we're going to go through to tomorrow, or the day after, because the lecture is then. And then we will see where we stand in the stream of time. So that is a little different perspective on history. Everyone in control, up to this day, is Masonic. And all the leaders, 99.999% of them, are Masonic. And I'll show you that as we go along. It's a terrible agenda. But the Lord has predicted it, and so there's no need to be afraid. There's no need to be afraid. This is exciting. May the Lord bless you as you ponder these things, and thank you for coming. Thank you.